So when you think of Elon Musk, what comes to mind, right? Tesla, SpaceX, maybe humanity setting up shop on Mars. But the story of how he actually built that empire, well, it has less to do with genius and a lot more to do with a relentless, almost brutal relationship with failure. And it really forces us to ask a pretty radical question. Seriously, keep that question in mind as we go through this, because if Elon Musk's story tells us anything, it's that the path to changing the world isn't some clean, straight line of victories. It's actually paved with the rubble of some pretty epic disasters. Okay, so to really get the stakes here, let's start with a number. $180 million. That's the fortune Elon Musk walked away with after selling his online payment company, PayPal, to eBay. Now, for most of us, that's it, right? Game over. You've won. You're set for life. But for Musk, that wasn't the finish line. Nope, that was just the starting capital. He took that entire life-changing fortune and risked every single dollar of it on his next seemingly impossible ideas. He didn't just bet the farm, he bet his entire existence on it. So you gotta ask, right? Where does someone get that kind of stomach for risk? Well, turns out it wasn't something he learned in a fancy boardroom. It was forged, way, way earlier, through a series of really painful setbacks. See, growing up in South Africa, Musk was not the guy we know today. He was this quiet, kind of nerdy kid who was always buried in a book. And that, well, that made him a target. He was bullied and, I mean, severely bullied. One attack got so bad he was pushed down a flight of stairs and beaten unconscious. He ended up at the hospital for weeks. To this day, he still has breathing problems because of it. After he moved to North America, his first shot at getting into the tech scene was, well, a total bust. He applied for a job at Netscape, which was basically the Google of the 90s, and they didn't even bother to reply. He actually drove all the way to their headquarters, but he was too shy and too intimidated to go in and talk to anybody, so he just turned around and left. You know, that rejection is what forced him to go out and start his own company. And that first company, Zip2, it wasn't exactly a fairy tale either. It did eventually get successful, but the board of directors, they didn't think he had what it took to lead. So they demoted him. They fired him from the role of CEO of his own company. You'd think lightning wouldn't strike twice, but it did. At his next company, which would eventually become PayPal, he got into a huge fight with the chief technology officer. The board took sides, they staged a coup, and the timing, it was just brutal. They fired him while he was literally on a plane, heading off for his honeymoon. He lands, checks his messages, and finds out he's been ousted. Okay, so now he's got that $180 million from PayPal, and he goes all in. But this is where the story takes a really dark turn. We're not just talking about setbacks anymore. We're talking about a time when everything, I mean everything, professional, personal, financial, it all came crashing down at once, pushing him right to the breaking point. The year 2008, it was just a complete nightmare for him. First, the unimaginable personal tragedy. He was coping with the sudden death of his firstborn son, Nevada, who was just 10 weeks old. At the exact same time, both of his new companies were imploding. On top of that, a messy public divorce. And to top it all off, he was completely out of money. So, SpaceX. He poured $100 million into this dream of making us a multiplanetary species. The first launch, boom, failure. Okay, back to the drawing board. They rebuilt, they refined, they poured everything they had left into launch number 2, and the third time has to be the charm, right? Nope. Launch 3 failed. That's 3 in a row. 3 multi-million-dollar rockets just gone. The media is calling him an idiot, and the company is basically running on fumes. So you've got this two-front war happening. On one side, SpaceX has just enough cash for one last launch. If that one fails, the company is toast. At the same time, Tesla is in a total death spiral. Its first car was way over budget, a year behind schedule, and the company was just burning through cash like crazy. And just when you think it couldn't possibly get any worse, he takes a trip and gets a near fatal case of malaria. He was in the hospital for 6 months and lost 45 pounds. It was so bad, he later joked that the big lesson was that vacations will kill you. But seriously, it was a terrifyingly close call that almost ended it all right there. So picture this. Your companies are failing, your money's gone, your health is shot. You've got two choices, walk away or push all your chips to the center of the table. He chose to bet it all. So that $180 million fortune? Here's where it all went. $100 million into SpaceX, $70 million into Tesla, another $10 million into a venture called Solar City. And that was it. There was nothing left in the bank. He poured every last dime he had into these ideas that everyone, literally everyone, was saying were completely doomed. And then, just when it's all about to go to zero, the turnaround. With everything riding on it, that fourth SpaceX launch is a perfect success. And that one single success was enough for NASA to say, okay, we're in, and hand them a life-saving $1.6 billion contract. And then, just days later, literally hours before the company would have gone bankrupt, Musk manages to secure last-minute funding to save Tesla. Both companies pulled back from the brink of extinction. But you have to understand the personal cost here. He had put so much of his own cash into keeping these companies afloat that he himself was flat broke. We're talking had to borrow money from his friends just to pay his rent. He risked it all, and for a while there, he had absolutely lost it all. So this whole journey, right, from the bullying on the playground to watching his rockets explode, it all forged this core philosophy in him. A completely different and pretty radical way of looking at the very idea of failure. And this quote, this really gets to the heart of it. Musk doesn't see failure as something to be avoided. He sees it as a signpost. For him, if you're not failing, it's a sign you're not pushing the boundaries hard enough. You're not innovating. You're just playing it too safe. So what's the big takeaway from all this? First, setbacks aren't endings. They're just data. Every rocket that blows up, every boardroom coup, it's just information for the next attempt. Resilience? It's not something you're born with. It's a muscle. You build it by getting knocked down and getting back up over and over. And the big one, real game-changing innovation requires a willingness to risk it all for that breakthrough. Which brings us all the way back to that first question, but this time, it's for you. Look, we're all taught to run away from failure, right? To avoid it at all costs. But what if that one thing you're terrified to try, that one big idea you've shelved because you're afraid it might not work? What if that's the failure that's standing between you and your biggest breakthrough?